Hi guys, I'm going to talk to you about limnology today, the notes that I've uploaded. I've uploaded them in a Word and PDF format, but if you can't open those, just follow along with me in this recording. So when we talk about what limnology is, it's the study of the biological, chemical, and physical features of all of the freshwater ecosystems that you're familiar with. So those include lentic, lotic, and marine ecosystems. So lentic are still waters like ponds, lakes, reservoirs, and wetlands. And lotic systems or flowing systems are streams, rivers, and estuaries. And then saltwater, including coastal, reef, and open ocean, are the different marine ecosystems. And so limnology is one of those really cool studies because it incorporates not just the physical nature, but the chemical, biological, and geological attributes of these ecosystems. And if you were to get a degree in limnology, you could study aquatic ecology. Other terms might be hydrobiology. And so they're really interesting. I've done some work in college around limnology, and I can talk about that if I have time at the end. Environmental science, by the way, is a multidisciplinary academic field that integrates physical and biological sciences. And so we apply that in the study of limnology because we want to understand the interrelationship between all those physical features, the geological, physical, chemical, and biological nature. And so the study of the environment and how those characteristics affect each other are very important. In fact, when we go to the river and do the river study, we're looking at the chemical, physical, biological, ecological natures of the river. So every time you study anything that has to do with the earth, the environment is part of that study. So with regard to water, it's really an interesting resource. We've talked about how important it is, but some of the things that most people don't understand is that that the chemical natures and physical natures of water allow it to be that really important resource for us and other organisms. So we're going to talk about that. It's liquid at room temperature, tasteless, odorless, colorless. Its highest density is at 4 degrees, and its lightest density is at 0 degrees Celsius. And so what that means is that when water is at 4 degrees, it sinks, and when it's at 0 degrees, it floats. And so we're going to take a look at that. I'm going to skip through these notes and explain these notes through a physical diagram that I have here. So the notes above are talking about these 4 images, and I want to talk about this because I think that a lot of people don't understand the importance of what water does throughout the seasons of the year. So we're going to look at winter, spring, summer, and fall. Right now we're coming off of winter and we're moving into spring, but let's take a look at back in the winter here. So probably January to February, we're in the middle of winter. And this is when the water on, let's say we're talking about Chatfield Reservoir, freezes starting in about November. It freezes from the outside in, and it creates this layer of ice. And as that layer of ice gets a little bit thicker, it insulates the water below. The ice is at 0 degrees Celsius, but the water below warms from 0 to 1 to 2 to 3 to 4 degrees Celsius. Notice it doesn't go above 4 degrees Celsius because water is densest at 4 degrees Celsius. Notice it's liquid down here. It's not ice. Why is that important? Because that's what allows fish to survive down here. As the days get warmer, we move into spring. So again, we're talking about maybe Chatfield Reservoir or another lake that you're familiar with that freezes. As it gets warmer in the spring, which it's doing right now, the ice starts to thin, and eventually it goes away because it's at 4 degrees, and you have what's called spring overturn, and there's a mixing of the water. So the water is uniformly 4 degrees Celsius throughout. As the days get longer and warmer, you have what's called summer stratification, and that's where the layers warm from the bottom up. And so you have the warmest layer on the top. So what it really means is that the sun is warming that top layer, but as the sun can't penetrate lower and you move from this layer at the top to the middle layer to the bottom layer, the temperature decreases. Now, these layers, which are mentioned up here, we have the epilimnion, the metalimnion, and the hypolimnion. Well, the epilimnion is this higher layer right here that's the warmest. Epi means above. The metalimnion is the middle layer, and it's meta means middle, and then below that is the hypolimnion, and this is, hypo means below, so it's this lower layer that's about 4 degrees Celsius. So thermal stratification just means, thermal means heat, stratification means layers, and so you've got 3 layers that form in a lake: epilimnion, metalimnion, and hypolimnion. And then as the days get shorter, again in the fall, you'll have what's called fall overturn. So these are the 4 states of a lake or a reservoir as they move through the seasons. The trophic state is a way for us to determine how much biological productivity is going on in a lake. And so it refers to the amount of photosynthesis that's going on. If I say to you, how much productivity is going on in a particular pond or lake, I'm actually asking you how much photosynthesis is going on. And remember, photosynthesis is what plants do. They take in carbon dioxide and water, and through the process of capturing sun's light energy in their chlorophyll, in the pigment that makes them green, they produce glucose and oxygen, and that gives them energy. Well, they also need a couple of nutrients, and 2 of those nutrients that are the favorite food of plants are nitrogen and phosphorus. And we refer to them as limiting resources or limiting nutrients, because without those nutrients, plants cannot grow, but with too much of those nutrients, they overgrow. And so when we talk about how productive a particular lake is, for example, we can refer to it as an oligotrophic lake, or a mesotrophic lake, or a eutrophic lake. So I'm going to show you these, or a hypereutrophic lake. So I'm going to show you some images of these, of what this might look like. So if I'm looking at a pond, let's say in the meadows, you see this often. We don't have oligotrophic lakes. This would be a lake that's probably in more like a boreal forest, where there's, and a boreal forest is like potentially in Canada. So it's below the tundra, but it's above temperate forest. These lakes do not have a lot of decomposition of plant matter, and so they might have a lot of evergreen trees around them. They can be very deep, and what happens is there's not a lot of plant growth, and so there's not a lot of nutrients, there's not a lot of productivity. On the other hand, you can have a lake where there's a ton of productivity and a lot of plant growth going on and a lot of decomposition of those plants. In the meadows, you would see this. You've got lots of vegetation around these little lakes. There at Meadows in Cherokee is a prime example. You've got a little pond there. And then over by the Grange, on the opposite side of the Grange, there's another pond. Very shallow, and in August and September, you'll see cattails growing like crazy, and you'll see this blanket of algae that forms. And that's because it's getting lots of nitrogen and phosphorus runoff from the surrounding houses that are fertilizing their lawns. It runs off and it runs into these lower areas where these ponds are. So what happens over time is that the bottom builds up and then it gets really shallow, and over time shallower and shallower, and can choke off the pond or the lake. So these are the 2 extremes. Oligotrophic does not have much photosynthesis going on, so we would call that a low productivity lake. But this one, which we would call a eutrophic lake, has a lot of productivity going on. Lots of algae growing, cattails growing, lots of plants growing. And then in the fall, when those plants die, they fill in the bottom, and eventually it just fills up and fills up. So a pond or a lake that's really healthy would be one that we would call a mesotrophic lake. It's right in the middle. It doesn't have too much plant matter growing and too much photosynthesis going on, but it's got more than a oligotrophic lake. So those are the 3 different trophic states. And then this last picture here is just a picture of a pond ecosystem showing you the amount of oxygen that's being produced and carbon dioxide from organisms. Keep in mind that plants are the ones that photosynthesize and give us oxygen, and animals take in that oxygen and give off carbon dioxide that the plants do. So the carbon dioxide oxygen cycle is a very important cycle. We call that the photosynthesis and cellular respiration cycle. I'm going to share information about that I expect you to know. So that's it for these notes, and I hope that you learned something new today. Take care, guys. I'll be sharing more information with you later. Bye-bye.